Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your grace and your mercy. And we thank you that you're the God that knows the end from the beginning. And we rely on you to direct our paths. We lift this mayor and council up to you, and we ask you for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Let's stand for pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, need a motion on the regular council minutes for the May the 5th meeting.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Mayor, you got anything to talk to us about?
No, not at all. Nothing going on around here.
Ain't nothing happening. I know it's quiet around here.
That's for sure. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just going to touch on a couple of points that I want to highlight to the council and to the public that is listening on the call-in line. And after that, I'm going to ask Chief Finley to come up as well and give some remarks. And I think there's some great people that he wants to highlight here. Can you hear me? Take this off.
Better.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me a little better now?
Yes, better.
Okay. So I'm just going to highlight just a couple of quick points, but one's financial, one is health related, and then I'm going to ask Chief Finley to come up and highlight some great work that's been done with our police department. I'm going to start with just kind of giving everyone a COVID-19 update. We're going to get into this a little bit more this week, but I want to just talk through some numbers that we have. I want to let you know that our hotline numbers have been pretty steady so far. We've had about 850 calls today, and it's been pretty similar over the last few days. Testing is up dramatically. However, positive results are also up dramatically as well. One of the things that we're noticing, and we've been informed, is that we're seeing a rise, or an increase, I should say, in these confirmed cases. So let's take, for instance, as of right now, we've had 907 confirmed cases for Montgomery County. May 1st through the 7th, we had a 45% increase. 7th through the 14th, we had a 46% increase, and May 14th through the 19th, we've had a almost 21% increase. So we're seeing numbers go up at a pretty steady rate, and it's a rate that's causing concern to myself as well as the health officials. We've had 24 deaths from COVID-19 in Montgomery County, 504 deaths in the state of Alabama. So those are just a few numbers that I wanted to highlight, but there's a part here that's problematic, and that is that we only have 2 ICU beds left at Baptist East. We are short 2 ICU beds at Baptist South. In Prattville, we have 1 ICU bed. In Jackson, we have 1. Baptist has begun diverting patients now to Birmingham, and that puts us in a very critical scenario. And I'm going to quote Baptist CEO Russ Tyner, who said, "We are past the limits of our capacity. We are not overwhelmed, but we are close. The situation is manageable, but not sustainable. While testing is giving us higher numbers, but testing is not filling up my hospital. People sick with COVID-19 are." Now, that's from Russ Tyner, CEO of Baptist Health. And I think many of you know Russ to be a straight shooter in his approach to all things as it relates to business, community, whatever it may be. And the concern that we have is that once we reach this number at our hospitals, then what do? And we have to keep those things in mind, that we're not out of the woods yet with this issue here, regardless of the easing of restrictions around the state of Alabama and around the country for that matter. we still need to keep our guard up, because what happens is when you have an ICU shortage, that means there's someone, whether they have COVID-19 or not, who's not been able to get that bed. And that puts them in danger. So it's not just a matter of the people who have COVID-19 who feel like they're indestructible or they can recover. It's a domino effect that it's having on our healthcare system. Not only in Montgomery, but as you all know, we're the regional capital for healthcare, so that impacts people as far away as Evergreen, as far away even as parts of Macon County, Bullock County, and certainly going into the Black Belt. So we have to think about the domino effect here, I think, in all of our approaches. And I think that all of us as leaders have to make sure that we maintain the message that people need to continue practicing social distancing. They need to practice sanitary practices that they were doing maybe just a couple of months ago, and that we need to take all steps that we can to wear masks when in public. And while we again have eased some restrictions due to the state's laws, we have to make sure that we still have some personal responsibility where this is concerned. What we don't want to see is this. We don't want to see a situation where there are no ICU beds left in the city. And that's what we are. You know, we're very close to being at that level, and that's a situation that we don't want to get to, that people didn't have to go to Birmingham for an ICU bed, because not everyone's going to be able to make that trip. And so we don't know if that's going to be a family member, a church member, a neighbor, or a friend, or anyone else. And so it's important that we continue to keep the message very out front about where we are in this community and where we are right now in our healthcare system. Because if you go back to the very beginning of this, one of the biggest concerns was not just the amount of deaths, was just whether or not our healthcare system will be overwhelmed. And we're in a very sensitive place right now, in a very critical place right now in Montgomery, and we're going into a holiday weekend. So that's not a place where we want to be, and so we want to make sure that message is carried forth through all of us that are in the council chambers or that are listening on the call. Everybody has a platform, everyone has constituency, and it's up to all of us to make sure that we're sharing this information. Now I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I'm going to hand it over to Chief Finley. I want to just kind of give you an overview of where things are and give you a financial update where the city is. And I asked our Interim Finance Director, Betty Beeville, to prepare this for me, and she gave this to me just a couple of hours ago. And I won't read the entire thing. I'm just going to read some of the high points, and then that'll conclude my remarks here today. The city's actual sales tax revenues for the month ending April 30th, 2020 reflected an increase above what was projected in the previous month's report dated March 31st, 2020. The primary reason for this increase was due to sales use taxes and the simplified seller's use taxes coming in stronger than projected for February collections that were reported in March. An analysis of grocery, building supply, and sporting goods sectors reflected a growth rate of 25 to 50% increase over the prior month. This was primarily driven by citizens stocking up on items such as sanitizers, toiletries, and general use items. The retail sector had negative growth rates of comparable percentages. If the positive growth rates stay constant for the aforementioned sectors for the remainder of the fiscal year, it is projected that the adverse effect of COVID-19 on the financial position of the city would be severe. However, it would not be as steep as originally anticipated. The collections in April that are being reported in May will provide a much clearer picture of the severity of COVID-19 on businesses, which will ultimately determine the impact on the city's financial position. We will have a much clearer picture once we get all the May numbers in, probably by about our second council meeting in June. We'll be able to better determine where we stand. However, I do want to reference an article by the National League of Cities, which indicated that cities could have a $360 billion shortfall in revenue from the onset of this pandemic through the year 2022. It was noted that cities that generate the majority of their revenue from regressive revenue sources such as sales tax or income taxes would be hit the hardest. Montgomery would be one of those. The article also stated there will be immediate impacts of massive declines in jobs and consumer spending. A 1 percentage point increase in unemployment results in a 3% budget shortfall for cities, towns, and smaller municipalities. So a 1% increase in unemployment has an impact of 3% on the budget shortfall for cities, towns, and other municipalities. So when we look at this, when we think about our employment numbers and what the impact could be, we're looking at a threefold impact on us financially. That presents problems, and those are issues that we're going to have to address regardless of how severe these shortfalls will be in this next budget cycle. So the outlook still is not good for where we're headed. It may not be quite as bad, but you know, whether you're bad or you're worse, I don't know if there's much difference given where we are right now. So we'll have a much clearer sense of this, I think, in about a month. And what I wanted to just do is make sure that I'm keeping you updated on our numbers and what we're seeing, regardless of what they may be, and what their impact is going to ultimately be felt by the city of Montgomery. That will conclude my message at this time. Chief Finley, I'll ask if you will please come up and give your presentation this time.
Mayor, can we ask you a question?
Sure. Mayor, I have a question. We talked about it a little bit last council meeting. Are we at a place yet where we're looking at 1, 2, 3, whatever the magic number is, percent across the board for our departments? Because we know we're going to be short something.
Yeah.
If we continue to wait on May's numbers, are we going to be too late down the road?
No. One, as I mentioned to you before, I don't believe in across the board cuts. My thing is you look at each department individually, and we've been saying that probably since March. So our cabinet officials are well aware of where we stand. They've already been trimming back, and they have already been taking some of these steps into their everyday decisions. So we've sent out a number of reinforcement communications to let them know that. And what we're trying to do is to make sure we don't, alarm our citizens or our employees here by saying we're going to have to do this, we're going to have to do that, and we don't have the full picture. What we do know is that we're going to have to cut, and we're going to do everything we can to maintain our jobs and maintain our services for the city of Montgomery. And that's where we stand right now. But we're going to look at each individual department on its own merit and really based on its own ability and impact. So what may be for public safety may not be for general services or may not be for public works. There may be some differences there. It may be different in Parks and Rec. So we're going to look at everything individual, and then we'll come to a decision from there.
Would we look at using some of the reserve to balance this budget?
I think we have to keep all of our options on the table right now.
I'm good. Thank you.
One other thing, Mayor, in this situation where the number of cases has gone up, has anybody talked to the county health officer?
I have not. Now, our EMA director may have, but I personally have not.
Yeah, I kind of think it would be time to contact them to see if they have he has any input, whoever that may be. I don't even know who the county health department officer is now, but.
Well, I've been in touch with our state health officer, Dr. Scott Harris. He and I have had a regular, chain of communication going, and the first thing I asked was, where are we seeing this spike come from? And we can't really tie it to nursing homes. We can't tie it to any manufacturing facilities. It's really just across the board in the community. Again, while testing is going up, we're also seeing those positive numbers, go up. And again, we talked about, a few months ago about us not having the level of testing that was needed. So, we're going to see some of that. But again, the point of concern is the ICU beds. And that's what we really have to drill down on. And we really have to make sure that as people do kind of get back to some of their old practices and behaviors, they're taking the precautions that they can.
Just to see. Very good, thank you.
Do we have any, you mentioned Jackson and Baptist South and Baptist East. Do we know how many patients that have been diagnosed with COVID-19 are in each one of these facilities today?
There's a count. I don't have it with me, but I'm sure we can get that to you.
Do we know how many of them are in ICU in each one of these facilities that were diagnosed with COVID-19?
They have those stats as well, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sure Chrissy Thorne can get us those.
Do we know how many, what's the number of positive tests in the city of Montgomery? I know we got 907 in Montgomery County.
I don't know. We don't separate them from city and Pike Road.
Okay.
Yeah, we just do it by the county.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Chief.
Good afternoon. Three things I'm going to talk about is, number one, I'm going to talk about the traffic enforcement initiative that we did, a 30-day initiative. Second is the 90-day summer initiative that we're going to embark on at the end of the week. And the last I want to talk about is Captain Saba Coleman will come up here and acknowledge the outstanding work of our men and women in the homicide division has been doing. So we're going to start with the traffic initiative. The beginning of the year, around February, March, and the first part of April, we got plenty of calls from community members as well as council members as far as the roving street parties, ATVs, 7 days a week. And it was kind of a daunting task initially in terms of what we're going to put in place to address those issues and concerns. So about a week prior to starting that 30-day initiative, talked to a couple councils that called concerned Saturday, Monday, it doesn't matter, any part of the 7 day during the week. And so we came up with an initiative for 30 days to really address those issues, 7 days a week, during the hours where we was receiving those calls. We addressed those issues. I'm waiting for the final count in terms of the actual number of calls dealing with ATV calls, these roving disturbance party calls that we received. But based on observation, and again, I'm just waiting for that data, I think it was a positive outcome. We did increase the numbers of traffic citations, arrests dealing with these individuals that was violating traffic laws during the city. Our main goal is not to lock up the world, but our main goal is to change driver behavior. And those numbers of calls from council that's here, as well as some of these community leaders, have really been minimized the last couple of weeks. So we will have a kind of infrastructure in place where if we start to see those calls coming up, we will reactivate and identify some of those units to really respond in kind. The units that were a part of that, it's kind of the MPD call. All units was involved, the Star Center, our gang unit, our traffic unit, as well as some of our discretionary units. So very kudos to the supervision and to the 24 officers that were assigned to that detail, and we changed hours. And so again, in terms of changing behavior, I think we're working towards that again, but it's not the be-all, end-all. We will reactivate that if we can. What we are ready to embark on starting May 22nd is the 90-day summer initiative. We haven't done this in about, this is going on, we haven't done this in about 2 years. And so I think that it's incumbent of us to really identify strategies to really deal with these issues and concerns that's happening throughout the city. Some of these problematic areas that we do have is known. And so we get a lot of calls there and challenge in some of these challenged communities. So we're going to have some proactive patrol addressing these issues, and regardless of the time of day, we will be able to address those issues. Safety in numbers, coupled with supervision to really address these issues. And the issues that we're talking about, I'm just going to face it, is going to be these drug complaints, these gang complaints, these shootings complaints, nuisance and trouble in these communities. We're going to have a proactive stance on that. And again, one of the things that we have to do, we will put people in jail that need to go to jail. And so we're going to really look at the way that we do things, the manner that we do things, but I think that we have a mechanism in place, and we're going to execute that, and we're going to evaluate that at the end of 90 days. But every 30 days, I can bring to council as far as what we see, and part of that metric that we're looking at is that perception of issues and concerns in these communities, that we know where those communities are at, or we're receiving those complaints. And so I can think of the last couple of shootings and homicides that we had that were in some of these communities. Those are the communities that we're going to focus on, plus additional communities that may come up. And so again, we look forward to that. And the challenge, not only to the council, but the communities, is kind of let us know where we need to be. And so we will have those officers out there to really address those issues. The other thing that I got to talk about is really helping us out is the curfew. And I'm going to say it's the curfew. I think the challenge that I saw last week, and I had the pleasure to have Councilman Mitchell with us, is these late night activities that we have in the city. And so the curfew really helped us out. I think that we went to about 8 or so locations, and we had 1 out of 8 that was out of compliance. The next day, the task force with our folks in the fire department went to all 8 or 9 locations, and we had total compliance. And so those are the type of things that we have to do, but I attribute that to the leadership of the mayor with that curfew, and we're going to be out there. And a part of that we discovered is that these liquor stores and these gas stations allowing individuals constantly throughout the night. We're going to deal with that as well. We're going to have officers out there to deal with that, to monitor that 10 o'clock curfew. We're not there just to get a bag of chips and go home. You need to go home. And so, again, we look at the safety, not only our officers, but the community as a whole. So we are really driven to do the right thing, to deal with the perception of crime, put the bad guys in jail, and that we're going to address those issues. And last, Captain Coleman, she's going to come up here and really talk about this new group of investigators and supervisors that we have with the narcotics correction, with the homicide unit, that's really turned the tide in the way that we investigate crime for the last 2 months, and moving our clearance rate over 60% over the national average. So these guys are really busting their behinds, doing relentless follow-up. So I'm going to let Captain Coleman take the show and identify these officers.
Good evening. I'm Captain Coleman, the Public Information for MPD. We want to take this time to acknowledge and honor our Homicide and Crime Scene Bureau for a job well done on the following cases. When I call your name, please come forward. Captain Rucker, Lieutenant Payne, Sergeant Dixon, Corporal Stokes, Corporal Lanici, Corporal Dabney, Corporal Brown, Corporal Dabney, Corporal Hicks, and Officer Augusto. On February 2nd, 2020, at about 6 p.m., MPD patrol and fire medics responded to the 4000 block of L.H. Hamilton Road in reference to a subject shot. There, MPD located Dana Riley, who had sustained a fatal gunshot wound and was pronounced dead at the scene. Because of the circumstances of the shooting initially were unknown, MPD homicide detectives began a death investigation. After further investigation, it was discovered that the shooting stemmed from a verbal altercation that escalated. The investigation was changed to a homicide, and Lorenzo Rayner was identified as a suspect. Rayner was taken into custody on April 17, 2020, and was placed into the Montgomery County Detention Facility on the charge of murder. On April 14, 2020, at about 12 p.m., MPD and fire medics responded to the 5900 block of Christie Lane in reference to a deceased subject. At the scene, they located Mayuri Cantilano lying on the ground. Further investigation and forensic evaluation determined that the victim had sustained a fatal stab wound. Further investigation also indicated that the stabbing stemmed from a verbal altercation that escalated. Ebony Smith and Jonathan Cordova both were identified as suspects. Both suspects were taken into custody on May 6, 2020, and placed into the Montgomery County Detention Facility on the charge of capital murder. On behalf of our Chief of Police, Chief Ernest Finley Jr., and the staff, we would like to recognize our Homicide and Crime Scene Bureau for their tireless hours put into solving both cases in record time. The homicide personnel relentlessly located and interviewed witnesses, in addition to recanvassing the area of the crime scene for additional witnesses and evidence. The crime scene personnel meticulously collected, preserved, and processed the evidence. The Homicide and Crime Scene Bureau worked cohesively as a team to effectively and efficiently solve both cases. Thank you.
Great report. Great report. Okay, Council, no special committee reports, I don't believe, are there? Let's go into the first item on the agenda tonight.
Mr.
Is,
President?
I would like to withdraw that.
Okay.
I've talked to the Secretary of State. He doesn't seem to need it. So if he's the head man, he don't need it. I don't guess we need to do it. So I'd like to withdraw number one.
Okay.
Go to number two.
Resolution authorizing Mayor Reed to make application to ALDOT for grants under the Transportation Act Safety Lou and to execute any and all agreements, and clerk does as same.
Motion to
Need
suspend
a
the
motion?
rules.
Did I hear a motion? Okay.
Motion to suspend the rules.
All right. All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted. Item 3 is now in compliance and withdrawn. Item 4, resolution approving issuance of business license doing business as Bama Auto Parts at 4119 Mobile Highway.
Okay. Need a motion to
Motion to suspend the rules.
Get a
Motion to
motion?
suspend the rules.
Mr. Calhoun made a motion to suspend the rules.
Did I hear it? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted. Item 5, application for retail beer and retail table wine off premises only, doing business as Lions Pride at 1121 Carter Hill Road.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Need a representative here?
Yeah.
Public hearing, right?
Yes, sir.
Public hearing first.
We need a public hearing on this. Representative, this item here, item number 5. See if somebody, representative for it. Okay, come in. Here he comes. Okay, Sam. Do we have anybody calling in on this item in opposition? Come on, please, come forward. Representative of Lions Pride. Your name for the record, sir?
Patel.
Okay, Mr. Patel. This is a public hearing. Anyone like to speak against this item? Like to hear it this time? Hearing none, declare the public hearing's been held. It's proper for the council. Need a motion to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted.
Good luck with your business, sir.
Thank you.
Item 6, resolution repealing resolution number 69-2020 and appointing Samuel Frazier to the Housing Authority.
Need a motion to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted. Item 7, appeal of proposed demolition of 1016 Buford Street by C. Ray Dennis Sr.
Is Mr. Dennis here?
Yes.
He's on the phone.
Is he on the phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Dennis, tell us what your issue is.
Well, my issue is I was accused by the housing inspector of neglecting the house. Well, I bought that property about 7 years ago, and I used that house for storage. And several times, I boarded up all windows and locked down the doors. And each and every time, eventually, someone would come in there and break in and take the place apart. And so I have not neglected it. Is it rentable? Of course it isn't. In fact, in my view, an arsonist was in there on April the 3rd. But no, I have not neglected the property. And second off, what I'm asking of the city council, I'm asking to give me more time in regard to get the property into an acceptable shape in the eyes of the city. I was, given us 45 days. I'm sure that's probably state statute. But I'm asking the rest of the summer, and in light of the pandemic and the horrible situation we all are in, including communicating with the government, even, of course, is not as it once was. I'm asking for that. I'm asking for an extension of time on what the city wants in regard to telling me to demolish it. And I also happen to be a 78-year-old blind man, and I would think that the city would have some compassion in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, let me let Mr. Conway from the planning department talk to us. Mr. Chris, tell us about
Yeah,
this.
at this time, Mr. Dennis has been in contact with Brandon Hodge of the Housing Codes Department.
Okay,
He has been asked to present a plan
okay,
to bring the house into compliance.
okay,
As you know, this is not being brought before the council at this time.
okay.
So we would still ask for you to deny the appeal, but we are working with Mr. Dennis in terms of all the time he needs. If he presents a plan and he provides some work towards that plan, we'll certainly work with him in any way that we can.
Sounds like a workable plan. Mr. Dennis, you hear that?
Yes, I did. And briefly put, my plan is to get competitive bids and to get the house demolished. I only ask for more time to get this done.
Well,
I'm
they'll
on
give
the
you
phone,
time.
For example, with the city fire department asking for a practice burn, and I'm certainly out trying to get competitive bids.
Okay.
And, go ahead, sir.
We hear you, and I think they will give you, the inspection department will give you time, okay?
Well, thank you.
Okay. Need a motion to uphold? I guess.
Need
Yeah.
a motion to
Deny.
deny the
Motion.
bill.
Yeah, motion to deny.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand.
Should have said it.
Okay,
Unanimous.
good deal. Next item.
So, Mr. President, just so I'm clear, Mr. Conway, if he does not do what he's supposed to do, you guys can go ahead and still tear this thing down, right?
No,
That's correct.
it hasn't been presented to.
No, it will come before you
It's not-
It
first.
will come back.
His 60
Yeah,
days
come
will
back.
run,
Okay,
and
okay.
it'll come back to
He's
you
still
to
got time.
approve the demolition, and at that time, we'll proceed with it.
Okay.
But again, he's got plenty of time to enact that plan, and we'll certainly work with him any way we can. And if he, for some reason, whatever it is, falls through, we'll fill in that gap.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, number 8.
Pursuant to Section 1153B1 Code of Alabama, authorization of demolition of unsafe structures at the listed locations.
Need a motion to uphold?
Motion to uphold.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Item 9, resolution assessing the cost of abatement of unsafe structures on various lots.
Need to suspend rules on the last 2 items.
Move to suspend the rules on the remainder of the agenda.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Need a motion
Move
to
to adopt.
approve number 9.
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted. Item 10, resolution declaring, authorizing, and assessing cost of abatement of public nuisances on various lots.
Let's go ahead and approve that. We got pressed for time. Go ahead. I need a
Move to
need a
uphold.
motion. Motion to adopt. All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous. Resolution is adopted. I have put before you some contingency funds. For District 7, these have been approved by the mayor. $500 to Have a Heart for Children, $500 to Freedom Riders Museum. And Mayor, I've received 2 requests afterwards. One is for District 3, and all of these are vendors. It's $1,000 to Faith Crusade, which is Chaplain Browder, $1,000 to Vision of Grace, $1,200 to King Hill CDC, $750 to Have a Heart for Children. Okay. And the second one is from District 5. It is for $1,500 to Young Men on a Mission.
Okay. Anybody else? Need a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Okay. We have some visitors with us this afternoon, some Boy Scouts members. Where are you from? Boy Scouts? Who's the leader? We welcome you here. Where?
Hey, they can come on down, Charlie. They can't
Okay,
be shy.
group 8, okay? If you have any discussion, we'll all be available after the meeting, okay? Very good, thank you. Anybody got anything else? Meeting adjourned.